Picture this: towers of cotton bales along a southern wharf in 1860. Ships crowd the harbor, masts like a forest, loading the fiber that clothes half the world. Planters in white linen stroll past, knowing every bale is money, power, and something more intoxicating: leverage. In smoky parlors and on the floor of the U.S. Senate, one idea takes hold like a fever. This fluffy white fiber is so essential to Britain and Europe that no one on earth will dare offend its masters. One senator sneers at his northern colleagues. No power on earth dares make war upon it. Cotton is king. 3 years later, those same ports are silent. The wharves are empty. Great warehouses that once pulsed with commerce now hold rotting bales guarded by hungry soldiers. In Richmond, desperate women raid bakeries shouting, "Bread or blood." Confederate money is worth less than the paper it's printed on. Doctors are paid in chickens. Somewhere between those heaving, prosperous docks of 1860 and the starving bread riots of 1863, King Cotton's throne didn't just crack, it crumbled. How did the South's greatest asset become the engine of its own destruction and rewrite the global economy in the process? Imagine you're a leading Southern planter on the eve of the Civil War. Your slaves are worth more than your land. Your cotton feeds the factories of Manchester, Liverpool, Lyon, and Bremen. Cotton makes up almost 60% of all U.S. exports, nearly $200 million a year. Britain gets about 4 out of 5 pounds of cotton from America. France, 9 out of 10. Russia, even more. All of Europe's clattering looms and humming mills depend on your fields. If war comes, you tell yourself, Britain and France won't just watch their mills go silent. They'll break any blockade, recognize the Confederacy, maybe even send ships and guns. You don't just grow cotton. You think you control history. The Confederacy isn't just gambling on generals. It is betting its entire future on one idea: that the world cannot live without Southern cotton. But what if the world can? And what if, by the time King Cotton needs his old customers back, they've already moved on? To understand the fall, start with the arrogance. In March 1858, Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina delivers what becomes the creed of his class. He mocks the North, praises slavery, and unleashes the line that will haunt the South: cotton is king. He believes that society rests on a mudsill of laborers at the bottom so the elite can rule. In his mind, Southern slaves, British mill hands, Northern workers, they're all mudsills. Their masters, he assumes, will stand together. That speech isn't just theater. It becomes grand strategy. Southern leaders convince themselves that European elites naturally sympathize with a slave-holding aristocracy. They picture British workers rioting rather than see their jobs vanish. They never consider that those same workers might hate slavery more than they fear unemployment. Then war erupts in April 1861. The Union Navy is tiny and scattered. Lincoln proclaims a blockade, but in European eyes, it's a joke. A paper blockade without enough ships to seal thousands of miles of coast. This is the Confederacy's window. Ship out every bale you can. Load British and French warehouses. Use those bales as collateral for loans, weapons, and machinery. Instead, they do the opposite. Spurred by King Cotton fever, Southern planters and local committees begin a de facto embargo. Ships ready to sail are held in port. Cotton is locked in warehouses. State legislatures cheer it on. The Confederate government barely has to act. The people enforce it themselves. The logic is simple and fatal. If Europe feels the pinch quickly, they think, panic will follow. Mills will close. Workers will starve. London and Paris will rush to recognize the Confederacy just to turn the spindles again. In 1862, the Confederates doubled down. To keep cotton from reaching enemy hands or the world market at all, they start burning it. Fields and warehouses go up in flames. An estimated 2.5 million bales vanish into smoke. Nearly half a year's global consumption destroyed by their own side. In 1860, the South ships about 3.8 million bales to Europe. By late 1861, exports are essentially zero. The tap is off. King Cotton has spoken. Now they wait for Britain to scream. Across the Atlantic, something unexpected happens. Nothing. At least, not at first. British brokers unlock their warehouse ledgers. They're sitting on a massive glut of cotton from bumper crops in 1859 and 1860, more than a year's extra supply. When the war starts, their storerooms are bulging. So instead of crashing, prices stabilize, then rise. Mill owners draw down stocks. Some are relieved. They'd been drowning in cloth, selling at razor-thin margins. The Confederate shock actually helps them clear excess inventory at a profit. Meanwhile, the Union's paper blockade hardens. Winfield Scott's much-mocked Anaconda Plan slowly wraps around the South. The U.S. Navy expands. Fast steamers replace old sailing ships. Blockade runners still slip through, but they adapt to new economics, small cargo holds, high risk, enormous markups. They don't bring in heavy machinery, rails, or bulk food. They bring brandy, silk, perfume, fine shoes, luxuries for those who can still pay. While soldiers march barefoot and railroads rot for lack of iron, elegant ladies in Charleston and Savannah order Paris fashions smuggled past Union guns. By 1862, New Orleans, the South's largest port, its cotton heart, is in Union hands. Mobile Bay follows. Wilmington, the last major gateway, falls in early 1865. The paper blockade has become iron. Inside the Confederacy, the financial foundation is rotting. The Confederate Constitution makes centralized taxation difficult. Export tariffs were supposed to fund the state, but there are no exports anymore. The self-embargo killed the golden goose before the Union Navy ever touched it. Attempts at direct taxes mostly fail. States pay in their own flimsy paper or promises. Perhaps 10% of war costs comes from taxation. The rest has to come from somewhere. So Richmond turns to the printing press. The new Confederate dollar, the grayback, isn't backed by gold. It's backed by a vague promise to redeem it after a future peace treaty with the United States, a future that looks dimmer with every battlefield loss. As confidence fades, prices explode. Early in 1861, one Confederate dollar is worth almost a US dollar in gold. By late 1862, it's about 40 cents. Late 1863, roughly 6 cents. By the end of 1864, maybe 2 cents. By April 1865, effectively nothing. Hyperinflation isn't an abstract curve on a chart. It's a soldier whose month of pay won't buy a single decent meal. It's a barrel of flour that cost $10 before the war, now selling for hundreds if you can even find one. The macroeconomic disaster hits ordinary people like a hammer. The blockade and collapsing rail network sever supply lines. Even when food exists in one region, there's no way or no usable money to move it to another. Prices don't just rise, they soar by factors of 50 or 100. Bacon that once cost cents a pound can reach $10. Shoes that cost $3 now sell for over 100, sometimes hundreds. Coffee becomes a rich man's fantasy. Salt imported mostly from Britain before the war, becomes a matter of life and death. Without it, meat rots. Families dig up the floors of old smokehouses, boil the salty dirt, and scrape off the crystals that form on top. Union raiders target Southern salt works at places like Saltville, Virginia, knowing that a blown-up brine, well today, means empty plates months from now. By the spring of 1863, the breaking point comes. In Richmond, hundreds of women, gaunt from hunger, gather and march toward the governor's mansion. Their wives and mothers, whose husbands and sons are at the front. Shops refuse them credit. Prices have floated into insanity. They seize wagons, raid stores, smash into bakeries. Shouts fill the air. Bread or blood. President Jefferson Davis rides into the chaos, climbs onto a wagon, and pleads with them to disperse. When words fail, he pulls out his watch and warns he'll order troops to fire if they don't go home. Reluctantly, they do. But the illusion of a united, stoic home front is gone. As paper money becomes wallpaper, the South slides backward into barter. Doctors and lawyers take payment in eggs, corn, or firewood. Newspapers ask subscribers to pay with food. The government itself imposes a tax in kind, demanding 10% of farmers' crops because it can't buy them with its own currency. This isn't the modern globalized cotton empire Southerners imagined. It's a pre-modern economy breaking under the strain of an industrial war. And still, Europe does not come. Why not? Think of it in 3 words: stocks, shifts, slavery. Stocks first. Those pre-war cotton mountains in British warehouses buy almost 2 years of breathing space. Mill owners run down their reserves instead of panicking. By the time supplies truly run short, the diplomatic landscape has changed. Then the shifts. High prices send a powerful signal across the world. Grow cotton, and you'll get rich. On the Deccan Plateau in India, British agents advance credit and urge peasants to switch from food crops to cotton. New railways hurry bales to the port of Bombay. Indian cotton is shorter stapled and harder to spin, but necessity is a fierce innovator. British imports from India rocket from a small share of their supply to the majority in just a few years. In Egypt, the ambitious Khedive Ismail seizes the moment. Egyptian long-staple cotton commands premium prices. Exports soar. With the windfall, he digs canals, reshapes Cairo into a Paris on the Nile, and pours money into the Suez Canal project, reshaping global trade routes for generations. Brazil, the East Indies, even parts of Argentina join the cotton rush. Between 1860 and 1864, the U.S. share of British cotton imports drops from dominant to almost nothing. New suppliers fill the vacuum. By the time Southern cotton could, in theory, flow again, the indispensable has become replaceable. Finally, slavery. The Confederacy's leaders badly misjudge British public opinion. Yes, British mill owners suffer. Yes, tens of thousands of workers in Lancashire face unemployment during the cotton famine. Local charities feed hungry families. Some blame the Union blockade. But when the choice becomes clear, support a slave republic to restore cheap cotton or endure hardship, many British workers choose hardship. They hold mass meetings. They send messages of support to the Union cause. When Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, redefining the war as a fight against slavery, intervening on behalf of the Confederacy, becomes politically toxic in Britain. Lincoln writes back to the working men of Manchester, praising their sacrifice and solidarity in one careful letter. Cotton may clothe them, but morality moves them. There's another crop too, that British leaders quietly fear losing: wheat. Bad European harvests make Britain sharply dependent on Northern American grain. Any war with the Union to break the blockade for Southern cotton risks cutting off food for British workers and endangering Canada. King Corn, one historian quips, proves just as powerful as King Cotton. So, London stays officially neutral. Shipbuilders still sell sleek blockade runners and even Confederate commerce raiders, but the British flag never flies over a Southern alliance. The Confederate bet that cotton alone could drag Europe into the war fails completely. By 1865, the result is total economic collapse. Cotton output in the South crashes from roughly 5 million bales in 1860 to about 250,000. Slavery, the foundation of the entire plantation system and the single largest asset class in the South, is abolished without compensation. Banks fail. Rails twist in Sherman's neckties. Confederate bonds and currency become worthless curiosities. Globally, the world has changed for good. India and Egypt are now firmly wired into the international cotton chain. Even when American cotton roars back after the war, the South never regains its old monopoly. Prices are lower. Competition is fiercer. Planters who once imagined themselves masters of a global empire are now debtors trapped in sharecropping, locked into growing cotton on credit year after year. The king that was supposed to guarantee independence instead leaves a legacy of poverty. For generations, the South remains the poorest region of the United States, its wealth burned, its labor system shattered, and its overdependence on a single crop exposed as a fatal flaw. So what does King Cotton's crumbling throne tell us today? First, it's a warning about resource hubris. The Confederacy convinced itself that control of one crucial commodity gave it unlimited leverage. It mistook dependence for obedience, assuming that because others needed Southern cotton, they would accept Southern terms. Markets adapted, and the leverage evaporated. Second, it's a lesson in economic fragility. The South had world-class exports, but almost no diversified industry, limited finance, and fragile infrastructure. When war came, there was no cushion. Burning your own product, blocking your own trade, and hollowing out your own currency is a brutal way to learn that a strong export isn't the same as a strong economy. Third, it's a story about moral limits on power. Southern elites believed that British workers would defend their jobs before anyone else's freedom. They were wrong. When the chips were down, many of those workers chose to support a distant cause of emancipation over their immediate economic comfort. King Cotton promised that wealth and necessity could silence conscience. History answered otherwise. In the silent, weed-choked ruins of old southern ports and in the booming cotton districts of India and Egypt that rose in their place, you can still trace the outline of that miscalculation. The moment when a kingdom built on a single crop tried to command the world, pulled the lever, and found the throne collapsing beneath it.